What is up, everyone? Chris McDaniel with Summit Insurance. Want to make a video on auto insurance coverages and run through some basics here. Won't take too long on this, but I did want to put together something that is kind of an extension of the conversation with the agency or your current agent, and just kind of run through some things that I feel is important, and kind of run through the what we're looking at when you open up these coverages, so that you have some things that you can be prepared with, either to ask questions or to review with your current coverage pages. So I went ahead and put together kind of basically a default quote here through one of the carriers. And so when you get into the coverage, the first thing that you're going to look at is going to be the liability limits. And so the liability limits are essentially a protection against lawsuit. And so if you get into an accident and you're found to be at fault, whether that's 100% at fault or 51% at fault, if you're found to be at fault, your insurance coverage is going to be the one that they use to pay out claims. And so in this coverage here, they have what's called split limits. And so, not to get too technical, but split limits is the most commonly used form of liability limits on an auto insurance policy. And so the split limit here is 100, 300, 100. Can't see it. It's kind of trailed off there, but it's 100, 300, 100. So that's 100,000 per person, 300,000 per accident, and then 100,000 in property damage coverage. So bodily injury, property damage, liability. So the 100,000 per person, if you get into an accident and someone's injured, and say that they have, $80,000 in injuries, this is going to cover that, cover their full cost. If they have $150,000 in injuries, it's going to max out at 100,000. That's the general gist of how they do the split limit coverage. If you get into an accident and there's 3 people injured and each one of them has 100,000 in injuries, this will cover up to 300,000 per accident. And so if there's multiple injuries and it extends beyond that, the insurance company is going to cap out at 300. Now, what happens after the fact, you can go read about state of Texas. Some states have, you get into lawsuits and they can garnish wages. I believe state of Texas, you can't do that, but you can go read on some of the outcomes with injuries if you do not have enough coverage, and some of the lawsuits that happen afterwards. So similar thing with the property damage coverage at 100,000. If you hit a Toyota Corolla, brand new, $25,000-$30,000, you're covered. If you hit a Bugatti or a Rolls Royce, that's 150, 250,000 or greater, it's going to cap out at the 100,000. And so extending beyond these coverages, the caps is what is, again, things that you can discuss with your agent about risk level, where you're at, the cost versus risk. So most insurance agents are going to want to recommend 250, 500 with an umbrella policy, if not single limit coverage, if you can find it. So there's a few things that you can do to surrounding this to have, cost per coverage. And it just kind of depends, if you're someone that has multiple claims and your cost, you're looking at, basically a mortgage bill. There's some areas here that you can work with that can help give you enough coverage as much as you can per your risk level, and make sure that you're getting as much out of your dollar investment into the policy that you can get. So uninsured motorist bodily injury, property damage coverage is going to be a similar dynamic as the liability limits. But this is going to be in the event that, you're involved in like a hit and run. If someone hits you and doesn't have enough insurance. So if you have the Bugatti and someone only has 25,000 in property damage coverage for their limits of liability. This uninsured motorist can step in and help meet the additional requirements. Now, it'll go up to 250,000 on this specific policy. But again, looking at different carriers, different coverage options, for your specific risk, your vehicles is something that we will run through and make sure that that we at least have the conversation. So uninsured motorist coverage, hit and runs, someone that doesn't have enough insurance coverage, especially within injuries. And before we move to the next thing, just injuries in general. If you get into an accident, you can't do the same thing that you did prior to the accident, such as, working. Say your average annual salary is $50,000. And so if you can't work for, 3 years or 5 years, that can very much add up well beyond the 250,000 limit. So if you're someone that has savings, family, you want to make sure that your finances are in order. The 250,000 with an umbrella policy is basically what we recommend. That's as far as a lot of agents will talk about full coverage. You can never be fully covered. You can just we can basically go to the policy to the extent that the policies will give us, and make sure that we're in the best position to help in the case of something happening. All right, so the next thing we're going to look at here is the medical payments and PIP. So the medical payments and PIP are roughly the same coverage, and so the difference is PIP is going to cover is a little bit more comprehensive, and it's going to cover areas like loss of wages. Medical payments and PIP cover individuals in the vehicle, whether or not they're on the policy, and they'll pay out for injuries to the individuals riding in the car, regardless of fault. So in most cases, you can get up to 10,000. Some carriers in Texas will cap it at 5. So it just depends on the carrier that you're working with, and just make sure and have the conversation with your agent to see what the max level is here. Most common thing that you'll see on the declaration page is PIP at 2,500. That's usually the minimum. Usually the difference between medical payments and PIP is, probably double the cost. So you can take a look here. So let's take a look at the pricing with medical payments and PIP. And so within the difference here is typically about double the cost. Let's take a look at what it is. So right here, it's $61. So let's keep that in mind. We're going to put that to waive. We'll go here to 2,000. So it's $500 difference in coverage. So 61 minus 33. So roughly about double the cost, about $500 more in coverage there. So the difference between moving it to 5,061 to 5,170, so about $40 difference to double the coverage. So just a quick review of the medical payments and PIP when you're reviewing that. Typically, you can do only one or the other, and most carriers will only allow one or the other. I've seen policies where both of them are combined. Either that's carrier specific, or maybe that is a basically the policy was initially written in another state. So again, things to review with the insurance agent, the carrier that you're working with. All right, so comprehensive and collision, and these are typically the areas where agents will say, "Do you want full coverage?" So again, kind of going back to the idea of full coverage, what does that mean? A lot of customers think that in any case, their policy is going to pay out, regardless, because, guess what? I have a full coverage policy, and that's not really the case. So in about 10 years ago. Um, and I think there's still a couple carriers out there. If you went to, a $0 deductible, they would actually list these comprehensive and collision as full coverage, because you didn't have a deductible. So it's been kind of a carrier specific term, and that's kind of bled into just a generalized term to mean that you have some type of liability limits and some type of comprehensive and collision coverage. So theoretically, you can have, $1,500 deductible with state minimum liability limits, and this would essentially be full coverage in the general use of the term. So be careful when an agent says, "Hey, I got full coverage, I have a full coverage policy here for you." You want to really kind of dive into the liability limits. This is the most important part of the policy, even more so than deductibles. This is the big money that's involved in an accident, the money that can make or break someone's life. And after an accident, excuse me. And typically, these deductibles, it's much easier to find, $1,500 than it is to find 30,000 or 60,000 or, $250,000. So when you're reviewing these coverages, make sure that you're hitting on those points, and that we're selecting the right ones. Again, cost per coverage, make sure that the risk levels are, to, fit and customized to your need. If you're a college student that just, gets a ride, I would much rather them have, a $250,000 deductible with $250,000 liability limits with $1,500 deductibles to hit, to meet a certain cost than state minimum coverage with, $100 deductibles, so that they can, if they get into a fender bender, they don't have to, come up with, a lot of money to repair that. So it's just conversations to have. If someone has a savings built up and deduct, specifically for the deductible, there's a lot of variables out there that we talk to customers about. So it's just about having the conversations, making sure that you have a plan together. Rental reimbursement. So just again, kind of getting back to comp and collision. Comprehensive is an area where is a coverage based on you hitting, an object. It's so if you hit a stationary object, if weather events, hail damage, flood is the big one here in the Houston area. That's going to be covered under the comprehensive if your car's stolen. So in a lot of cases, some of our customers will have an older vehicle, and certain carriers will have options to just have the comprehensive placed on that vehicle. So we'll get a lot of clients that come in that have, a 2005, 2004 Acura Integra, and it's just sitting in the garage, not doing anything. It hasn't been rebuilt, but you can actually suspend coverage in some cases where you eliminate the need for liability limits because it's not being driven, and the sole focus is on the theft and the prevention if if it gets involved in a flood or something like that, flood, fire. Collision, most commonly used one on the policy if within an accident. So this is if you hit another vehicle and you're found to be at fault. And so the collision coverage, if you're in an accident, you hit someone, you're found to be 51% at fault or 100% at fault or anywhere in between, this coverage is going to pay for the rebuild of your vehicle. And so depending on the deductibles that you choose and the cost of the rebuild, that is going to come into place during the claims process. And so again, if you get into a fender bender and you have a $1,500 deductible and the cost is going to be $1,400, doesn't make a tremendous amount of sense to claim something like that. But if you get into an accident and it's a complete totaling of the vehicle, then it would be the typically the actual cash value of the vehicle minus the deductible $1,500 or whatever you choose, and that would be the claim payout for that. Rent. So some of the other things that would come into place here. So the other last two common areas is going to be rental coverage. Rental coverage, you get an option of a daily limit and then a maximum amount of days. So typically 30 days is the maximum. I want to say that there's some higher options with other carriers out there, but this one has a max 30-day. And you have a choice of $40, $50, $70, $100. Some carriers have discounts with certain rental companies. So that might be a question that you ask your agent when you're reviewing this. And so depending on this level here, if you go to your, the rental car website, you can kind of see what's going to be affordable with the insurance. And then they typically will talk to each other, make sure that you're getting into something that the insurance company is going to cover. As far as the claims process, I think that's another video on the areas like the rental coverage, what happens if you go beyond the 30 days, what to expect during the claims process. That's a great subject for another video. Roadside assistance. So in this case, you have $75, $500, and $1,000 option. And not to downplay the roadside assistance with insurance carriers, but just in general, some of the feedback that I've gotten with multiple carriers is, a lot of carriers will use roadside assistance. They'll contract out to local dispatchers and vendors. And what ends up happening is they actually get a discount for doing that because they're bringing volume with their deal. And so the feedback that I've gotten is that sometimes the dispatchers will dispatch a trucking service to go pick up someone or go help for a tow, pick up someone for a tow, and the tow truck may head that way, but then get a call for essentially a bigger paying project on the way to that client. So with certain carriers out there that I've had experience with, it's actually a lot better to just call the towing service and get reimbursed for this. So if you have questions on roadside assistance, this is what it's for. But I just wanted to run through that story because I've had some experience with carriers kind of going through that process, and it's not just one carrier; it's multiple carriers like that. I might even recommend having an outside service for roadside assistance if it's within the budget. But this is there and can be reimbursed. With most carriers, and a lot of carriers will have an app or something like that you can go through as well. So just wanted to expand on roadside assistance. These are going to be the common coverages in the auto insurance policy. So they're getting down into some of the additional coverages. This one in particular has a loan lease payoff, so gap insurance. You can, because this is a newer vehicle that's entered here, because this is a newer vehicle, it has replacement costs. So if you have like a 3 years newer vehicle, a lot of companies will offer replacement cost on that vehicle versus the actual cash value for some additional premium. There's some other, original equipment manufacturers. So if you get into an accident, something needs to be rebuilt, you can add some coverage in here that gets the manufacturer's equipment versus OEM parts or like aftermarket parts. And it's a comp only. So this goes back into the suspension of the vehicle for certain cars that are just, basically parked garage cars that don't get any driving. Um, so that is a breakdown of the auto insurance coverages for this specific carrier. So other carriers may have some additional bells and whistles. So some carriers have deductible rewards that they offer or diminishing deductible. Some carriers, this one does as well, has accident forgiveness. And some additional areas for discounts, such as telematics. Telematics is going to be the thing that your agent asks about, plugging something into the vehicle or downloading an app. And so there's some areas surrounding policies that you can get some additional discounts for. Biggest one is always going to be the multiple policy discount. If you can get an auto policy with the same company as your home policy, they typically will give, especially this specific carrier here, will give a huge discount for doing that. But not in all cases is it going to be the best fit. So that's something that an independent agent can run through multiple carriers for you and see if, there's a solo company out there. If you have a brand new roof, if you're in a specific zip code, there's some home insurance only companies out there, standalone companies that might be a better fit, give you a better cost comparison versus, even the multiple policy discount. Some other areas, with carriers that have, home auto, the ability to quote home auto and umbrella, is you get that full package deal, home auto and umbrella. In a lot of cases, you can't write umbrella without the home and auto, or vice versa, and with some carriers. So that, that additional coverage for umbrella sometimes, limits the amount of companies you can quote with. The good thing is independent agents will have some companies that write umbrella policies standalone. So whether you get the multiple policy discount, or you have you have an auto standalone, home standalone, and an umbrella standalone, there's options out there. So that wraps it up. If you have any questions on this, feel free to leave a comment below. Love for y'all to like and subscribe to the channel. And please, if this helped out, let us know. And happy hunting, happy shopping. If you have any questions, we're here to help. Thanks so much.